Good evening, everybody, and thanks for your participation in this monthly webinar. The subject of this webinar is about the translation of um, questionnaire and scales in medicine, especially in the Unani and Persian medicine. The speaker of this webinar is my teacher, Professor Dr. Abbas Ebadi, um, faculty member of Baqiyatullah, University of Medical Science in Tehran. Uh, our teacher is a pioneer of a team of expert professors that manage the standard tools and standard scales in all majors of medicine in Iran, especially in the Persian medicine, and we use their experience for several projects about the standardization of Persian and Yunan medicine diagnosis tools like Salman Nejad, Mizaj questionnaire, Mujahidi Mizaj questionnaire, Jafari Mizaj questionnaire. We develop a lot of questionnaire about for the Mizaj diagnosis, Mizaj Am, whole body Mizaj, and elderly people Mizaj, and so some standard scales for diagnosis the Mizaj of organs like gastric Mizaj and liver Mizaj, and inshallah we will publish all of these project, the result of this project as a standard diagnosis scales in Persian and Unani medicine in the short future, inshallah. And the science centers, scientific centers, and researchers will use them for their project. We eagerly at your service, Professor Dr. Abbas Ebadi. Please start your presentation.
Let me just explain a little bit about the title of this lecture today that we are all of us are just waiting for Professor Ebadi to start his lecture. As the title is the process of translation and cross-cultural adaptation. If you remember, we have discussed this topic and the importance of this scientific process when we are dealing with the research projects in Unani or Persian medicine, especially when we are going to use some standard questionnaires to measure, for example, the such a qualitative concept as Mizaj is. This is very important to use standard scales and standard instruments like questionnaires, as mentioned Dr. Mujahidi. Professor Ebadi, we are just waiting to start your lecture. Please start.
Yeah, Dr. Danshvar, please continue your introduction. After some minutes, inshallah, Dr. Ebadi join us.
Okay.
Okay. Dr. Ebadi, please
Dr.
start.
Ebadi, we are hearing you. Please start.
Thank you so much. In the name of God, dear colleagues, I have your own way. First of all, accept my apology speaking in English. Tonight, we talk about one of the skill development approaches. Basically, we have two approaches. One is to build new skill, and the other is to use the scales or questionnaires of others. The second approach we all talk about tonight. Please, next slide. Health research has increasingly become multicultural and international in scope. This in turn has sparked efforts to adapt and translate high-quality health measures for use in diverse cultures. Original instruments are often English, created with the predominant cultural group in mind. Please, next slide. Cross-cultural validation scenarios. Developing high quality and cross-culturally valid instrument requires even more time, effort than starting from scratch with a new instrument. Yet without such project, it would be impossible to understand health outcome globally. If, for example, we want to learn whether health-related quality of life differs across country, comparison cannot be made with disparate instruments. As another example, many drugs trials are international in scope, and such trial benefit from the use of the same outcome measures. Next, please. We have multiculturalism in variety of culture. Even within a single country, increase multiculturalism. Often necessarily the adaptation of well-validated instruments. For example, understanding health disparities in countries like the United States and India requires the use of measures with cross-cultural validity for different ethnic, racial, and language groups. We have a two approach, centered and decentralized translation. Translation can be described as either centered or decentralized. In a centered or asymmetric translation, the instrument is translated into another language with no effect on the wording of the original instrument. In other words, loyalty to the wording on the original instrument is maintained, and the original version is a standard against which translation are compared. Such translation typically occur after the fact, that is, after the original measure has been validated and been identified as a candidate for translation because it has desirable features such as reliability and validity, brevity, acceptability, and lack of noteworthy floor and ceiling effect. Next, please. But the centered translation or symmetric translation. By contrast, the centered or symmetric translation involves the possibility of modification to item on the original instrument. Such centered translation often reflects the goal of replacing culturally more understanding language. This approach is often adopted when the developer node is advanced that the scale will be used to learn. So translation activity are built into the scale development process. For example, in the United States, it may be prudent to anticipate the need for Spanish translation during the instrument development phases and pursue a decentralized approach. As an example, Kaufman translated diabetic self-efficacy skill into Spanish, used the centered approach. Next, please. We have some of issue for translation and cross-cultural adjustment. The issue of equivalence. The goal of instrument adaptation and translation is to create an instrument that is equivalent to the original one. In cross-cultural measurement, equivalence is important as reliability and constructability. The concept of equivalence in however complex. Then the conceptual equivalence concerns the extent to which the construct of instead of interest exists in another culture and whether the construct has similar meaning. In other words, the question is whether there is high degree of conceptual agreement across cultures regarding the focal construct. Without conceptual equivalence, there may be little point in instrument adaptation. For example, in the construct of pleasure, meaningful in development toward society in which daily survival entails struggle. Does the construct of ability have the same meaning and across culture? Construct equivalence overlap with another type of equivalence mentioned in the literature, experiential equivalence. If an activity excuse me, my camera is on. Really, sorry. If an activity, behavior, or a feeling in not experienced in the target cultural, then construct is unlikely to have much meaning and an adaptation may not be feasible. Another equivalence is a content equivalence. Content equivalence concerns the cultural relevance of individual item for the focal construct within the culture under consideration. For example, the short form 36 or SF36 is a quality of life tool, has an item that asks about respondent ability to do moderate activity such as bowling or playing golf. This example of moderate activity would have low relevance in many countries. Other activity that require a similar amount of exertion and that are appropriate for both men and women must be substitute an example of moderate activity. For example, riding a bicycle in Italy and the Netherlands is a good example for this issue. Next, please. Other equivalence is a semantic equivalence, is the extent to which the meaning of an item in the same in the target culture after the item is translated as it was in the original. Semantic equivalence then concerns the adequacy of the translation. Literal translation are never satisfactory. The translation needs to preserve the underlying meaning of the original wording rather than the exact wording. There is considerable overlap between semantic equivalence and what some people refer as functional equivalence. Next, please. Other equivalence, conceptual and technical equivalence. Several cross-cultural experts have advised that the first place to begin an adaptation project is to learn a lot about the culture and ascertain that the construct being measured in the meaningful in the cultural that is to gain a preliminary understanding of the conceptual equivalence of the construct in the original and larger culture. So conceptual equivalence is not an all or nothing attribute. It is situated on a continuum. At one end of the continuum, people in the two cultures are in total agreement about the existence and meaning of the construct and on how the construct is manifest. At the other end, the focal construct does not even exist in the target culture. In health research, conceptual equivalence is often partial in between these two extremes. The process of cross-cultural adaptation is there are a diversity guideline for translation and cross-cultural adaptation. In many cases have a similarity that in the summarize the follow four step. Forward translation, step one, step two, synthesis to translation, and after this back translation, and finally reconciliation. We have a sum of protocol for translation. For example, we have a suggest WHO protocol. This protocol include 5-step implementation of this method. Include the following step. For example, forward translation, then expert panel, back translation, then pre-testing and cognitive interview, step 4, final version, and finally documentation. Is a good guideline. I suggest this protocol full of cross-cultural adjustment is common in this some of article and manuscript. Next, please. This protocol about is a good framework for related International Society for Pharmacoeconomics and Outcome Research. This protocol includes 10 steps. You see this slide. Preparation, number 1 step, then forward translation, reconciliation, backward translation, or other steps. I describe globally this protocol, this final slides. Next, please. This protocol relates Bayton and et al. And published in Spine Journal. They describe protocol translation include 5 stage. You see this slide in this protocol. Next, please. This slide related SF36 protocol. This protocol related to international quality of life assessment. This protocol is a common protocol, some of research. Generally, this protocol recommend international quality of life assessment project, and very is good and standard and common protocol is used in some of research. Next, please. Okay. We start step by step translation process and cross-cultural adaptation. Step 1, start with forward translation. After selected an instrument or scale, we have permit as a developer, then select one of guideline, or for example, WHO guideline, International Quality of Life Assessment, or Bayton guideline. Then start select one of this protocol and start for a step. But step 1, the first step in the translation process is called the forward translation, in which the measure item, response options, and instruction are translated from the source language into the target language. For example, source language Persian into the target language Indian, or English to Persian. The current recommendation call for a team translator, not just one. Often the translating team include 2 bilingual individuals, who we will designate it as the forward translation 1 and forward translation 2, FT1, FT2, forward translator. Each translator whose native tongue should be the target language works independently to translate the measure from the source to the target language, blinded to the work of the other translator. If possible, the translators should be bicultural as well as bilingual, so as to better grasp subtleties and idiomatic expression. And ideally, they would have had a prior translating experience. Next, please. Characteristic of translator. Bayton and colleagues have recommended that one of the forward translator be familiar with the construct that's being measured. For example, have some appropriate clinical knowledge. For example, a physician or a nurse or midwifery, bilingual, this step is a good choice. They recommend that a forward translator to, however, be a or general translator who is less influenced by academic concerns and it attend to the language used by the target population. This translator is a general translator, yeah, translator. Contrary to Bayton and Etar recommend that both forward translator 1 and 2 be knowledgeable about the construct. Next, please. Step 2, synthesis. Once the forward translation and associated documentation have been complete, the next step is to synthesize the information. The goal is to produce a preliminary version of the translated instrument that take into consideration the viewpoints of the multiple translator. The synthesis typically involve face-to-face meeting between the translator and investigator. The various versions of the translations are reviewed item by item with the aim of achieving a consensus regarding the best possible translation for each. This step will be merged to forward translation. Step 3, back translation. A back translation in which the synthesized forward translation is translated back into the originally source language. The process is essentially a check to make sure that the translation reflected the same item content as the original, that is, that semantic equivalence has been achieved. Back translation typically involves to bilingual translator whose native tongues in the source language. This new team of translator we will call the back translator and back translator 1 and 2 must be blind to each other translation and to the original wording in the source instrument. Next, please. More often than not, the original and back translated versions are not identical. This may simply mean that to achieve a similar conceptual equivalence for an item, a wording change in the forward translation one need. For example, in the SF36, if reading a bicycle was substituted for playing golf in the item on ability to do moderate physical activity, the original and back translation would definitely be at odds. If you in 15 table, few example of both identical and no identical backward translation. I deliver a good book for sent to Dr. Majadi, deliver it to you. Send, please. Example of forward and backward translation of item stem for original item is English, forward translation to Spanish language. You see this good example for forward and backward translation. Then compare forward and backward translation in research team. Next, please. Finally, a step for reconciliation. The last phase of translation process involves a final reconciliation with a committee of experts. Bayton recommended that the committee be composed at a minimum of methodologists, health professionals, language professionals, and translators, forward and backward translator, involved in the process of dispute. If possible, the original developer of the instrument should be involved as well. Next, please. Okay, the goal of the reconciliation committee is to delete all the information from the translation to the extent to which semantic and conceptual equivalence has been achieved, and to develop a pre-final version of the instrument in the target language for future testing. The committee should have at its disposal all documentation generated in previous stage, including all translation and note and any of the translator rating, such as an difficult rating. Achieving a consensus on all items may be difficult. If necessary, the process of translation, translation, and review should repeated for problematic items with different teams of translator until the researchers are confident that maximum equivalence has been achieved. The research team should consider how best to improve the process in the second iteration, for example, by selecting translator with better qualification, or by modify the training or instruction to translator. Of course, if the centrating is possibly another alternative is for the reconciliation committee to make changes to the source language version. For example, replacing an original item with its back translated version. Next, please. Pre-testing the pre-final translated version before full fielding translating of the translating instrument. Researchers typically conduct a pre-test by administrating the pre-final version to 30 or 50 monolingual people from the target culture or country. The pre-test sample should reflect of kind of diversity expected in population of interesting, including those which the lowest level of education. Frequency distribution information from the pre-test and then examined for clues to potential problems such as failure and or a ceiling effect and high rate of missing data on item. But qualitative information at this stage is also critical. Next, please. Okay, and cognitive questioning or cognitive interview. The pre-test of the translated instrument often incorporate cognitive questioning as a further the means of examining semantic and conceptual equivalence. Cognitive questioning typically occurs after a respondent has completed the skill rather than as a think-aloud procedure during actual completion, careful probe, and or used to shed light on how respondents interpreted each item. Common question is do use the content validity of cultural relevance. Sometimes the pre-final version of the translate instrument is also subjected to a type of content validation. For example, content validation, content validity ratio, or content validity index. I recommended you use content validity index that focuses especially on content relevance or cultural relevancy. And next, please. And final review and report. Prior to the coming to conclusion that the adopted instrument is ready to be field tested, the accumulated evidence should be completed and subjected to a final review, preferably in a face-to-face meeting of a review committee. The team should include those who played a major role in adaptation project and, if possible, the developer of the original instrument. When there are lingering concerns about conceptual or other types of equivalence, the committee could include additional cultural experts. Finding from the translation process, the pre-test and final review are usually compiled into technical report. The report should document the adaptation process as well as the rationale for all decision made in the adaptation. Next, please. Thank you for attention. I'm sorry for speaking poor English. I ready for answer to your question.
Thank you very much for your good presentation, Ebadi. Is there any question? Please ask. Open your ask from Professor. And is there any comments you have? Please tell us about the this scientific method about the research in Yunnan and Persian medicine. Please, all participants, open your microphone and ask your questions.
Rashid Beka here from South Africa. If I can maybe say a few words.
Assalamu alaikum, dear Professor Rashid Beka, please.
Yes. Obviously, this presentation, goes into extensive detail, and of course, in any translation, there's always possibility of accuracy being compromised. So yes, overall, the whole approach and everything step by step is very extensive. So alhamdulillah, it shows, and of course, it's well researched as well. So this is my humble comments. So thank you very much.
Dear Dr. Danishvar, please describe the comments of Dr. Rashid Beka to our teacher.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Bicha, for your uh, kind words, and thank you so much. I just appreciate this presentation and just make mention of the detailed process of a valid translation of an standard tool and standard uh, scale. I just want to put forward a question from Professor Ebadi. Professor Ebadi, first, I would like to thank you again for your nice presentation and describing very briefly the general steps when we are going to translate a questionnaire to another language, considering the cultural backgrounds and cultural differences that uh, we are know that there are other than a language differences between two countries and two language. We have also have to consider the cultural differences, and that's why we have to go through these steps that you have mentioned very carefully. But as a general, when we look at these steps at the first glance, it seems a little difficult and of course costly. Of course, we know that these are the true scientific process that have to be passed if you want to do a rigorous work and if you want to provide a reliable and valid instrument to be used in our research projects. But is it really I don't know, is it all of the researchers and all of the questionnaires that we are used have obeyed such a detailed process? And for example, I'm just thinking about the bilingual teams of different teams of translators that should be involved separately in forward translation and then in backward translation, and then some of them have to be involved in the expert panels in next steps. My question is clearly is that do we have always access to these bilingual translators for each language, for at least two languages that should be covered by these bilingual translators? And what we should do if we do not have access to this translator? For example, we have now some questionnaire in English or in Persian that we have to translate them to different cultural communities in India to be used by our colleagues or other researchers in that area. So it seems that we have to first just search and find some bilingual translators to be able to do this process. So it seems to be a very big problem and obstacle. What is the solution? Is there any solution for this problem? Or is not at all problem? I think it is problem. What's your opinion, Professor Ebadi?
آقای دکتر دانشفرد خیلی ممنون. اگر اجازه بدید من فارسی بگم، شما زحمت بکشید ترجمه. سوال مشخصتون این بود که پیدا کردن دو تا مترجم در واقع نیتیو
دو زبانه، بله دو زبانه باشه و تازه باید دو تا تیم مختلف باشن، هر تیمی فکر کنم دو تا اینجوری که فرمودید جدا خورده بفهمید که میخوام پرکتیکال بگیم که چیکار کنیم.
بله من شما محبت کردید پروسه یه بار دیگه هم گفتید. یه مورد اول که حالا شاید برای کشور ما خیلی اهمیت نداره ولی حتما باید رعایت کنیم، قدم اول گرفتن مجوز یا پرمیژن از در واقع دیولپره که اگر این کار رو انجام ندیم بعداً برای انتشارش دچار مشکل میشیم.
اجازه من تیکه ترجمه کنم که دوستان رو با خودم همراه کنم دور نشن.
پس پرمیژن.
Yes. So dear colleagues, Professor Ebadi just step by step is just reviewing and mentioning what we have to do when we start to translate a questionnaire or standard tool or scale. First step is the permission that we have to have this permission from the person that has made this questionnaire, this scale for the first time, to be able to have this legal permission for going through this process. بسیار خب. بعد در مرحله بعد
گام دوم انتخاب ترنسلیتور هاست. یعنی قدم اول ما میخوایم فوروارد ترنسلیشن کنیم، یعنی از زبان ببین حالا چون ما رو مزاج کار کردیم، فرض بر این بگیریم مثلا مثال عملی بدیم، پرسشنامه دکتر مجاهدی رو بخوایم برگردونیم به زبان اردو یا به زبان یکی از زبانهای هندی یا مثلا پنجابی. بعد از اینکه
for an example, just imagine that we are after getting the permission, as an example, we are going to translate the Mujahidi Mizaj questionnaire to Urdu language, for example.
دو تا ترنسلیتور، دو تا مترجم باید پیدا کنیم که این نگاه بخوایم مقدار تعدیلش کنیم، یعنی مودیفای کنیم. دو تا مترجم که به زبان فارسی و اردو مسلط باشن که حالا میتونن جفتشون ایرانی باشن یا جفتشون هندی باشن پیدا میکنیم. یکی از مترجما آقای دکتر باید اسپشیالیست تو هلس باشه، یعنی پزشک، پرستار، مامان که اردو و فارسی بلد باشه. دومیش هم جنرال ترنسلیتور میتونه باشه.
بسیار خوب. پس من همینجا بگیم okay, at the first step after getting permission for translating the Mizaj questionnaire of Dr. Mujahidi to Urdu language, at least this is the least necessary translator that should be provided and involved in the project. We need at least 2 bilingual translator to be completely familiar with both languages of Persian and Urdu. And another feature that they have to possess is that one of these translators should be a health professional, a physician, or any other personnel of the health system, health professional. And the second one should be a general translator. So 2 translator and 2 bilingual translator at least is necessarily needed to start this process. And the next step?
الان ما 2 تا پرسشنامه به زبان اردو داریم. الان تیم تحقیق باید این 2 تا پرسشنامه رو با همدیگه مرج کنن، یعنی آیتم با آیتم، یعنی سوال به سوال با هم مقایسه میکنن و ترجمه مناسب رو انتخاب میکنن.
ترجمه‌ای که جدا از هم انجام شده.
بله جدا از همه. حالا تیم تحقیق میشینن خودشون یا از اکسپرت های دیگه هم میتونن کمک بدن.
Okay. At the next step, we have 2 different Urdu translation of the original Persian version of this questionnaire that have been separately have been translated by these 2 bilingual translator. And now the research team and the expert panel should compare one by one and item by item a question translated content of these 2 separate translations of the original questionnaire and check them and compare them with each other. خب
این مقایسه از نظر سمانتیک یعنی همگرایی معنایی و از نظر کالچرال ریلیونت بودنه. اون مثالی هم که توی اسلایدا بود، مثلا گلف ممکنه تو فرهنگ ایرانی نباشه که باید معادلش ما یک ورزش معادل پیدا کنیم. بله، یا یه دارویی ممکنه یا یه لفظی ممکنه توی طب سنتی ایرانی باشه، باید معادلش رو در اردو پیدا کنیم.
A very important and critical point in this step of the research group is the comparisons of the content of the translated questionnaire in 2 languages based on their cultures, and in other words, we have to do the semantic translation and semantic comparison between the two languages. As mentioned in the Professor Ebadi lecture, for an example, sometimes we have a special word in a language, in a culture, that its word by word translation into the target language is not enough and cannot conduct and transfer the concept. So it should be semantically translated. Just an example, you have to, for example, change the meaning of the conceptual meaning of playing golf in a language, in the original language, to, for example, playing riding bicycle in the target language, just to consider the cultural meaning of that special task. So in this step, that other than the word by word translations, the semantic meaning should be considered based on the cultural background of the target language. بسیار خوب معلم.
پس این دوتا فوروارد که به زبان اردو شد ما اینو مرج کردیم، یه دونه داریم. حالا سراغ ترنسلیتور شماره 3 و شماره 4 میریم که همون خصوصیات مشابه ترنسلیتور 1 و 2 رو داشته باشه، یعنی نیتیو به زبان مبدأ و مقصد باشن، یکیشون اسپشیالیست در هلس باشه، یکیشون هم جنرال ترنسلیتور. حالا این دفعه اینا برمیگردونم به فارسی، میشه backward translation.
Okay, the next step, as mentioned before, is backward translation. In the previous step, we merged the two versions of translations to the target language, considering the semantic meaning of the original language, and we merged them, and now we have one translation in target language. In this step, again, we need two other bilingual translators with the same features. As we mentioned, these two other translators should be bilingual, completely familiar with the original and target language, and also one of them should be a health professional, and another one should be a general translator. And in this step, again, these two translators separately translated the questionnaire in the target language to the original language again, what is known as the backward translation.
خب دکتر ما الان 3 تا پرسشنامه داریم. یه نسخه اصلی دکتر مجاهدی به زبان فارسی، دوم فوروارد شده به زبان اردو، سوم بکوارد شده به زبان فارسی. خب اینو میخواد بفرمایید تا من بعدش.
بله. Now at this step we have 3 different versions of the questionnaire. First one, the original Persian version of the Mujahidi Mizaj questionnaire, the forward translated version in Urdu language, and the third one is backward translated in Persian, or the second Persian version of the original Persian language questionnaire of Mujahidi questionnaire. Okay, so we have 3 different versions of the questionnaire.
گام بعدی اینه که نسخه بکوارد شده که میشه فارسی رو میفرستیم برای دیولوپر که اینجای دکتر مجاهدی هست. ایشون پرسشنامه رو آیتم بای آیتم بررسی میکنه و ببینید که آیا اون معنایی که منظور ایشون بوده منتقل شده یا نه.
Okay. At this step, the backward translated version of the questionnaire, which is in Persian, should be sent to the developer, which is in this example is Dr. Mujahidi himself, to compare it with the original Persian version of the language and compare item by item these 2 versions of the Persian language questionnaires to check any differences, any disturbance in the translation, and just give this feedback to the expert panel and to the research team if needed in any item of the translations to be checked again.
بعد از اینکه نسخه بکوارد رو دیولوپر تایید کرد باید یک پایلوت استادی انجام بدیم. پایلوت استادیمون یه بخشش کاگنیتیو اینترویو یا مصاحبه شناختی که میگیم افرادی که قرار پرسشنامه ما رو پر کنن، فرض کنید آدمای معمولی کلاس 7 تا 8 باشن یا تحصیلات پایین داشته باشن، سوالات رو با صدای بلند تو دلشون بخونن، اگر با لمه مشکل داشتن به ما بگن.
یعنی اصلا مفهوم متوجه میشن.
آره مفهوم متوجه میگن کاگنیتیو اینترویو.
بسیار. Okay, at the next step we have to when the developer confirm the backward translation comparing it with the original language, now we have to start and go for doing a pilot study to check the questionnaire. And the first step in the pilot study is the cognitive interview with the participant. That in this process we have to choose some people with the lowest education, just at the level of reading and comprehending the concepts in this language, that just they have to read the questionnaire by themselves and just to see whether they can conceptually get the meaning and the core meaning of the questions or not. خب در اینجا پس ما کاگنیتیو اینترویو رو انجام دادیم.
بله که میتونه مثلا 10 نفر باشه. قدم بعدی پایلوت ما 30 تا 50 نفر این دفعه پرسشنامه رو برای ما پر میکنن. یعنی دیگه بعد از اینکه مصاحبه کردیم مشکلات گرامری برطرف شد 50 نفر برای ما پر میکنن.
که اینا از چه گروهی باید باشن؟
همون آدمایی که براشون پرسشنامه رو ساختیم. یعنی فرض کنید پرسشنامه
جمعیت مطالعه.
بله جمعیت مطالعه.
Okay. And the next step, when the cognitive interview has performed and the cognitive and content of the questionnaires were confirmed regarding the concepts, we have to do the pilot study in a population of around 30 to 50 people in our study group that the questionnaire has been designed for them, and just to fill out the questionnaire in this step of a pilot study.
هدف دکتر بررسی اینه که کدومی که از گویه ها میسینگ دارن، یعنی بهش جواب ندادن. اثر سیلینگ و فلور افکت، یعنی اثر سقف و کف هم بررسی میکنیم. سیلینگ و فلور افکت یعنی اینه که ممکنه یک گویه باشه که همه این جواب داده باشن یا اون برای که به میگن اثر سقف یا کف، سیلینگ و فلور افکت. این اگر همچین اتفاق بیفته میسینگ داشته باشیم یا سیلینگ اند فلور افکت داشته باشیم، این میگه که ترجمه ما یا ادراک اون جمعیت نسبت به این سوالات ضعیف.
این خیلی مهمه. ممنون از توضیحتون استاد. A very important point that is to be checked in this step of just examining and testing the questionnaire in the pilot study is checking any missing in the answering, and also checking the ceiling and or floor effect, which means that sometimes we face with the situation that a great proportion of the participants have or just answered in one of the extremes of the answers, which is mentioned as the ceiling or floor effect, and this just imply a kind of problem in the translation. So and guide us to reconsider the process of forward-backward translation and check it any disturbances in the process of translation.
یه نکته که من یادم رفت این 30 تا 50 نفر آیتور باید ورییشن مناسبی داشته باشن، یعنی خانم باشن، آقا باشن، مزاج گرم باشن، سرد باشن، معتدل باشن، ورییشن مناسب باشه. تو انتخابش باید دقت کنید.
Another important point is regarding the enrollment of the participant in the pilot study. That should be very carefully selected. We have to consider the different variations of the gender variation, or for example in this specific example which is about the Mizaj and Mizaj assessment. So we have to consider both male and females, and of course from different Mizaj groups and subgroups. All of them should be recruited and enrolled in the pilot study to provide us better results and more reliable results.
گام بعدی بررسی کانتنت ولیدیتی، فقط مربوط به زمانیه که ما تغییری تو واژگان داشته باشیم. مثلا اگر فرض رو بر این بگیریم که یک سوال ممکنه این باشه که من روزهای یک شنبه کلیسا میرم در جامعه مسلمون، خب این باید تغییر پیدا میکنه، روزهای جمعه مثلا نماز جمعه میرم. یا نوشیدنی الکلی چون اینجا ممنوعه از نظر قانونی، ممکنه یا گوشت خوک ممنوعه، یک واژه‌های مناسب باید تبدیل بشه. در این جور مواقع باید متخصصانم روایی فرهنگی رو تایید کنن.
دقیقاً همون چیزی که تو قبلش هم تو پروسه ترجمه فرمودید دیگه.
بله.
Once again, it should be more emphasized the content validity that should be checked at this step. Of course, again, that as we make mention of some example that some specific words or phrase in a specific cultural concept should be changed based on the target language, because only word by word translation will not work. For example, about the religious affairs in the if we have something in a Christian culture language, Christian culture country, which is, for example, is going to do some religious works in Sundays. Okay, so it should be, for example, translated to a Muslim country to just going for prayer of Jummah in the Fridays, for example. So this is about the content validity that should be checked in the expert panel, those who are familiar with both cultural contexts.
و اینجا فرایند ترجمه تموم میشه، ولی حتما باید کانستراکت ولیدیتیش یا روایی سازم در ادامه توی جمعیت بزرگتر، کانستراکت ولیدیتی 200 تا 300 نفر، ریلایبیلیتی تست ریتست 50 نفر با فاصله 2 هفته چک بشه.
پس فرمودید که در مرحله بعد کانستراکت ولیدیتی هست
و ریلایبیلیتی با جمعیت بیشتر.
So at this step, the process of translation is just completed, and at the next step, we need to check the construct validity that should be piloted in a much larger group of participants, which is about 200 to 300 participants, and of course checking the reliability. So the construct validity and reliability should be checked in the next step after completing the translation process.
اگر سوالی دارن اساتید من در خدمتشون هستم.
Okay. بسیار متشکرم. Thank you very much, Professor Ebadi, for your nice presentation and just reviewing the important point of this scientific process in the translation of the questionnaire and the standard scales. Dear colleagues and participants, if there are any question, we are at your service.
Thank you for your cooperation, Dr. Danishpad, about the discussion about more comments about the presentation of Professor Abadi. I emphasize that we are some standard scale, standard questionnaire for Mizaj diagnosis in Persian language in Iran that have begun all process of standardization, and they publish their articles in the valid journals. And we are starting, we're going to start methodological translation to another language, especially English, by participation of some colleagues from United States and Canada and India. And I kindly invite other colleagues from other countries, especially from India. Is there any standard scale, a standard questionnaire for about in Yunani medicine in India that have the paid all of the process, scientific process of standard scale? We are ready to translate by our team from Indian language for Urdu language or English, that common English in India, to Persian language for using in Iran for our research. Is there any standard questionnaire? We are ready to translate them with this scientific method. And inshallah, in the next future, we will start our project about the translation of our standard questionnaire in Persian medicine to another language, especially Arabic, common English in India, and Urdu language, inshallah, by cooperation of our colleagues from India, from Arabic countries, and United States and Canada, inshallah. Thank you very much. If there is any comment, we are ready to heard, and because we don't have enough time, we will continue our discussion, inshallah, in the next session, inshallah. Is there any comments or question?
Dr. Shahid Khan, if you have any comment, please.
Yeah, please. I would like to, first of all, I would like to thank Professor Abbas Ebadi as well as Bebek Daneshwar. Because of him, it makes me more clear about the paper, because he asked a lot of questions, and later on he translated the important views in the English. That makes me give me much sense. So it's a nice and excellent work you did, and your work is going on as well. So it will help to the researchers, especially in connections of the all views or all subjects, not only the Mizaj. In other ways it will also we can use, but where it is necessary in the translation. As you know that I am from Bangladesh, and the Unani or the Farsi Persian medicine is mainly belongs with the Farsi, Zabani Farsi, Zabani Arabi, Zabani Urdu, and we peoples belongs with the Bangla language, so it is difficult. So we require always translate the books. So those who are the teachers here, they know a bit about the language, especially the Urdu. The books are available through the Indian markets. So the thing about the translation, it is very necessary to translate appropriately, so the mafhum can be understood. So it's your presenters, especially Professor Abbas Ebadi, thank you very much. Your presentation given me much enlightened me and gives much encourage me about the actual mafhum of in translation, whether it is forward or back forward, what is it? Thanks a lot, and I should appreciate to taking this such a kind of the webinar continuously. Please invite us always when we will get a chance. We will like to join and we'll get some knowledge and which can be disbursed to our the students here in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Bikaya again. I hope I'm not keeping everybody up for too long. Definitely, Professor Abbas showed an amazing, expensive detail of everything. Also, in response to a lot of the questions that were raised by Dr. Baba, one must find, to actually bring everything together might be a little bit taxing, a bit difficult. Well, inshallah, from my experience in South Africa, we have a very simplified version, and inshallah, if possible, if I can, if I'm invited, I've been invited to do the presentation next month. Now, of course, it's not as academic. It's actually so simple that I hope it can be used as a foundation. But inshallah, once again, Professor Abbas, it's very extensive, and inshallah, irrespective, the outcome is going to be to achieve what we're trying to achieve in the first place, having a international questionnaire that will be practical, feasible, applicable all over the world, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you very much, Professor Bikha and Dr. Sharif from Bangladesh. We are ready to start cooperation for some for translation from Persian language to language in Bangladesh and South Africa. And is there any questionnaire, standard questionnaire there from our colleague in Yunani medicine in Bangladesh or South Africa? We are ready to translate them to the Persian and use them in our research, inshallah. And we will collaborate with together in the group and with Dr. Daneshpar and other colleagues, inshallah, and start our research about this need method, this important method for translation or standard tools to develop more and more valid research, inshallah. And my pioneer, Dr. Professor Ebadi and his team, his expert team in the development and standardization of scales in Persian medicine will help us to step by step to do our work best, inshallah. We inshallah start our translation, and you can in PWID send us your suggestions for the starting and for cooperation, inshallah. Dr. Shams, do you have any comment, or Dr. Danesh and other colleagues?
Yes, if I may.
Okay, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here again with our Indian and Iranian and Bengali colleagues. I have two questions from Dr. Ebadi, maybe three. Before that, let me express my gratitude again to Dr. Mujahidi for all of these programs that you're enjoying, for Dr. Daneshfat for the nice translations and clarifications he's providing. And in this session, more than everybody, thanks to Dr. Ebadi, we have been learning from him in Iran and his very valuable team. Now he's expanding to international areas, and this is I'm very happy to see this. So I turn to Dr. Ebadi. I ask my questions in Persian first. He will answer me, and then I translate both parts to other colleagues. I try to be brief. Is that okay, Dr. Mujahidi, if I do this? دکتر عبادی سلام علیکم.
در خدمتتون هستم. یه بار دیگه سوالتون رو میفرمایید دکتر.
الان عرض میکنم. یکیش برمیگرده به قسمت اول فرایند که داریم ترجمه میکنیم. من مشخصا به همین موردی که درباره ترجمه از فارسی به اردو اگر باشه و ما از اون دو نفر مترجمی که یکی جنرال هست و یکی اکسپرت استفاده میکنیم، این سوال به ذهنم اومد چون ما در صحبت‌هایی که با این دوستان داشتیم و حضوری که در جلسات ما داشتن، خب کسانی بودن که سه زبانه، یعنی هم انگلیسی بلد بودن، هم فارسی، هم اردو. و ما در مکالمات انگلیسی که با دوستان هندی داشتیم، خب این بنده خدا به ما کمک میکرد. یه جاهایی من احتمال میدم اگر یه همچین شخصی قرار باشه کمک بگیریم و استفاده بکنیم، با توجه به اینکه دانش ایشون از فارسی و انگلیسی تقریبا برابر بود، یعنی هر دو براش زبان خارجی محسوب میشد که حالا یاد گرفته بود و از همه مسلط‌تر به همون زبان مقصد یعنی اردو بوده. و ما یه جاهایی احساس میکردیم که یه مطلبی رو اگر حتی انگلیسی بتونیم به ایشون برسونیم، ایشون بهتر به اردو برمیگردونه تا اینکه فارسی رو تلاش بکنیم بگیم، یا به هر حال ترکیبی از این دو بوده. من به ذهنم رسید احتمال داره یه همچین حالاتی حتی در ترجمه مکتوب هم به دست بیاد، یعنی اونجایی که ایشون قرار از زبان مبدأ رو کامل بفهمه تا به زبان مقصد برسونه، اگر با ما مشورتی بکنه قبل از اینکه بخواد بشینه روی کار و ما یه جاهایی رو به انگلیسی بهش توضیح بدیم. می‌خواستم ببینم این آیا یه جور ناخالصی در این فرآیند به حساب میاد، یعنی معنیش اینه اون کسی که ما به عنوان بایلینگوال فارسی اردو انتخاب کردیم واقعا بایلینگوال نیست و باید سراغ کسی دیگری بدیم، یا اینکه نه این اجازه رو داریم که مخصوصا در این تبدیل از مبدأ به یک مفهوم از هر زبان دیگری استفاده کنیم تا شخص براش جا بیفته و حالا به اون زبان مقصدی که تسلط داره برگردونه. آیا اشکالی داره که انگلیسی اینجا نقشی ایفا بکنه در رابطه بین ما و اون شخص به شکلی؟
آقای دکتر خیر، با اغماض میشه پذیرفت. ببینید من پرسشنامه‌های زیادی رو از آسیای جنوب شرقی، چینی، تایوانی خواستیم استفاده کنیم. خب ترنسلیتور پیدا کردن سخته. از اونا که خواستیم در واقع اونا ورژن انگلیسی رو برای ما فرستادن و ما بر اساس ورژن انگلیسی این محدودیت رو جبران کردیم. یا باز به زبان اسپانیولی هست، این محدودیت رو خود اون دیولوپر، یعنی یکی از کارهایی که آقای دکتر مجاهدی باید انجام بده، باید کنار فارسیش خودشون، چون زبان فارسی یا زبان اردو ممکنه به قول معروف بردش تو دنیا کم باشه، بهتر این دیولوپرها نسخه انگلیسی رو آماده کنن، خودشون کامل تایید بشه، چون انگلیسی زبان سهل الوصول تره برای بقیه زبان‌ها. ولی اون پیشنهادی هم که شما دادید با اغماض میشه انجام داد، چون من خودم این کارو کردم.
درست. پس من این بخش رو بگم تا سوال بعدی هم بپرسم. So I translate this question and the answer provided by Dr. Ebadi. My concern was with the involvement of a third language, here for example English, in the process of the first translation from the main language, in the case of Dr. Mujahid's question, which is Persian, to the target language, which is Urdu. The question was that, is it okay if to make the first translator, either the expert one or the general one, to make them fully understand the concept, we sometimes use English as a supplement in our negotiations with that person, either in oral form, or Dr. Ebadi mentioned that they have already done this. When they send the questionnaire in Persian, for example, it could be accompanied by an English explanations or even the English version of it, so that the translator we can make sure that he understood everything, and now he's going to translate it to the target language, which in this case would be Urdu. So the answer was yes. There is some degree of tolerance, and when we say that the translation is from Persian to Urdu, it doesn't mean that we cannot use English in our communication and negotiations with the translator in oral or written form. And the next question is about the developer. دکتر عبادی اونجایی که اشاره کردید که آخر کار که ما دوباره بک ترنسلیشن رو انجام دادیم، ارائه میکنیم به دیولپر که اون به ما بگه آیا این نسخه فارسی که حالا دوباره از اردو برگردونده شده آن چیزی هست که اولش میخواسته بگه یا نه. من برام این سوال پیش اومد، یعنی انتظارشو نداشتم که دوباره ما به دیولپر رجوع بکنیم. اون اول که برای پرمیشن هست، خب منطقیه، این مسئله اخلاقی و حقوقی باید اتفاق بیفته به شکلی. اما اونجا برام این سوال پیش اومد، آیا امکان نداره حالا که ما دو تا متن داریم و اینا ویژگی‌های زبانی خودشونو دارن، ما به هر حال با معیارهای زبانی مستقل از اون دیولپر خودمون یک حدی از این همانی رو در نظر بگیریم، جمله ها رو برابر هم قرار بدیم و بگیم این دوتا یک معنی دارن یا ندارن، فارغ از اینکه اون شخص خودش این. چون از این به دو دلیل این فکر رو کردم. یکی اینکه دوباره رجوع به دیولپر اینجا شاید خودش سختی‌هایی ایجاد بکنه و مهمتر از اون به شکلی بازم ما داریم خودمون رو درگیر یک سابجکتیو اسسمنت میکنیم، یعنی اینکه اون شخص به ما بگه که آیا این پرفریز شما و اون جمله اولیه من یکسان هستن یا نه یه چیزه. اینکه ما به صورت ابجکتیو از بیرون دو تا متن رو با معیارهای زبانی که همه به شخصی داشته باشن، چیزی شبیه این که مثلا وقتی میخوام پلجریزم رو نگاه بکنم یه برنامه‌ای هست که میزان شباهت رو میسنجه و میگه اینا شبیه هستن یا نیستن، حالا ما عکسشو ما اینجا میخوایم که شبیه باشن. به هر حال یه نوع ابجکتیو. پس دو تا سوالی، یکی اینکه اول اینکه ممکن هست که ما به عنوان یه آلترناتیو به جای رجوع دوباره به دیولپر خودمون این بررسی رو انجام بدیم، و سوال بالاتر اینه که آیا مطلوب‌تر نیست که اصلا همین کارو بکنیم؟ یعنی ممکن و مطلوب بودنش رو اگر بفرمایید ممنون میشم.
خواهش می‌کنم. آقای دکتر، مطلوب‌تر اینه که حتما دیولپر بررسی کنه، به خاطر اینکه این همه دقت‌ها به خاطر اینه که خطا رو ما کم کنیم و واقعا اون سمانتیک اکویولنسی که بهش گفتیم، همگرایی معنایی، واقعا منتقل شده. حتی اگر خاطرتون باشه من گفتم بعد از اینی که دیولپرم حتی تایید کرد باید یک کاگنیتیو اینترویو هم بکنیم، یعنی یک مصاحبه شناختی با کسایی که جامعه هدف ما هستن که تحصیلات پایینی دارن، به خاطر که اونا هم همون برداشت رو داشته باشن که سازنده ابزار از این موضوع داره. البته من کیسایی رو داشتم که دیولپر اجازه داده، وقتی که ما نسخه آخر فرستادیم دیگه بهش دسترسی نداشتیم و در واقع جواب نداده و ما با اغماس اون تلفیق دوتا ترجمه رو پذیرفتیم. ما تو مقاله هم اشاره کردیم که در واقع این بخش از کار رو حذف کردیم. چه کاگنیتیو اینترویو چه بررسی دیولپر، فقط بررسی به خاطر افزایش کیفیت ترجمه است از این منظر.
درست. و سوال آخر، حالا دوتا رو با هم میگم، اون قسمت کاگنیتیو اینترویوی که میفرمایید ما دقیقاً چی رو با چی مقایسه میکنیم؟ یعنی بعد از اینکه دیولپر به ما اوکی داد و گفت بله این ترنسلیشن شما قابل قبوله، ما میریم دوباره با در واقع شرکت کنندگان با اونا میشینیم و اون درکشون رو به صورت شفاهی مطمئن میشیم یا نه باز دوباره این رو با جای مکتوب بکنیم مقایسه کنیم با چیزی که داریم؟ اینجا مبهمه که چی با چی مقایسه میشه تو قسمت کاگنیتیو اینترویو.
آقای دکتر مقایسه صورت نمیگیره. فرض رو بر این بگیرید یکی از سوالات آقای دکتر مجاهدی اینه که من در سرما هم تعریق میکنم یا من معمولا تعریق میکنم. اون مشارکت کننده ما که گفتم کلاس هفتم هشتمه میگه ببخشید آقای دکتر تعریق یعنی چی؟ یا میگه با استنشاق بو کهیر میزنم. معنی استنشاق رو متوجه نمیشه. علارم که دوتا مترجم تایید کردن، دیولپر تایید کردن، یا اصلا بحث یبوست و خیلی از مردم ما با واژه یبوست مثلا ممکنه آشنا، یا وقتی که میگیم تهوع متوجه نمیشن، باید بگیم عق زدن. علارم که تهوع و یبوست و استنشاق و تعریق و دیولپر دوتا ترنسلیتور 4 تا ترنسلیتور تایید کردن، این کاگنیتیو اینترویو با زبان لی پرسون ها یعنی نان اکسپرت پیپل ها در واقع این موضوع رو بررسی میکنه.
درست. پس در واقع این چیزی اصلا فارغ از ترنسلیشن، یعنی حتی ما در ساخت اولیه ابزار هم میتونیم یه همچین مرحله رو داشته باشیم که مطمئن باشیم اون دریافت کننده همونی رو میفهمه که ما میخوایم.
احسن، که به ما فیس ولیدیتی های دکتر میگیم.
درست. خیلی ممنون. استفاده کردم از معذرتون. این رو من سریع به دوستان بگم رو بیشتر وقت نگیرم. Okay, I asked two other questions from Dr. Ebadi. The first one was concerned with the role of the developer in the final stages of when we have the final translation, after the back translations, and then we present them to the developer. We ask him or her to tell us if it is the same that they had in mind. And my question was that, is it possible or even more desired to omit the role of this person, forget about the developer at this stage altogether, with the reasoning that we have two texts. One is the original version in Persian, and another Persian version which is after translation. We can compare them and tell if they are the same or not in a desired degree. And the answer was that no. Still, we need to go to the developer if it is possible. That is the ideal case. If not, it can be accepted, but we have to mention it as a limitation in our study. And after that, I asked another question about I forgot what was the next one. سوال بعدی که پرسیدم دکتر چی بود بعد از این قسمت دیولپر این آخری درباره اینکه قسمت conceptual interview. The next part was about the conceptual interview. I asked what is the mechanism involved here? What are the things that we are comparing to each other? That Dr. Ebadi explained that it is independent from the translation. After we are done with the developer, after they have given us the okay for the translation, now we want to make sure if the layperson understands exactly what we have in mind. Even when we are making a new questionnaire and it is not a result of translation, we do need such a stage, and here it is the case as well. So I got my answers. I hope this process of translation was not too fast or too ambiguous for our colleagues. I give the floor to Dr. Mujahidi. Thank you, everybody. Dr. Mujahidi, with that.
Thank you very much. I think the time is running out, but the story remains, and inshallah we will continue to another webinar next sessions, inshallah. Is there any comments from our colleagues? Please, for 2 or 3 minutes, please continue, and then we finish our session, and by appreciation from all colleagues. Thank you very much, Professor Ebadi and Dr. Shams, Dr. Daneshfar, and Professor Bikha, and so Dr. Sharir from Bangladesh, and other colleagues from all countries. Inshallah, we have good sessions in the next webinars, inshallah, and inshallah we will start our methods and our project for translation of our scales from Persian language to English and another language in our projects. And inshallah, we are looking for another scales from another countries and another language, of course, standard scales, to translate them to Persian language and use for our research in the Iran, inshallah. Thank you very much for your good attention, and have a good time, all colleagues, and good night.
All colleagues, thank you so much. Have a good time.
Thank you so much, sir. Shab bakhair.